Well, it has been a while, folks. Thanks for coming back to the Surf and Sales podcast. I want to say it's been 2 or 3 weeks. We'll introduce you to our guest in a second. I am Richard Harris, one of your hosts, co-hosts, and co-founder of the Surf and Sales event coming up in November in Costa Rica. Now is the time to plan. If you need a hard reset on yourself, like a computer, there's no better place than Surf and Sales in Costa Rica. Scott is back from traipsing through Europe. I think he's going to try and write this entire vacation off as a Surf and Sales recon trip, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct,
right,
Scott?
Yeah.
So
it was a 2-week business expense.
There you go. Exactly. So how was it, man? Just real quick. Tell people
it's a lot of fun, man. Southern Spain is like unbelievable. So
yeah,
really easy living. Let's put it that way.
There you go. So, all right. Well, glad to have you back. I look forward to catching up with you on the personal side of how things went and everything. I know you took your boys over to go play in soccer, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So
yeah,
they went to some Euro soccer stuff, so they'll be much better than the rest of us here. But without any further ado, enough about Scott. Enough about me. Let's introduce our guest. This is Meshell Baker, who is, I'm going to butcher this because she just told me, but I have ADHD, transforming the perception of chaos. But Meshell, introduce yourself, tell people what you do, who you are, what you're transferring, transforming, translating, all of it.
Hey, thanks for having me, Scott and Richard. I'm Meshell Baker, the Chief Confidence Igniter, and what I'm a master at is translating the perception of chaos into a practical and profitable confidence. And I enjoy doing that with teams, organizations, and individuals. And my talk topics and workshop topics and coaching topics are confidence, imposter syndrome, and leadership. So I do that with various companies. Some of the current companies that I've been working with are Daimler and Groendyke. So women in trucking, women in operations, women in tech, women in sales. So I tend to go places where there's not a lot of women, and I do exceptionally well in those organizations, teams, and individuals.
That's great. Yeah, we're happy about it. How did you even choose this? Like, what was your path like to, yes, this is something we talk about. We talk about, imposter syndrome, courage, confidence in sales all the time. There's always a little bit in my training to it, but I don't have a full-on curriculum. How did you know to go deep?
Well, it's that when you do what you love and you give it to the audience, they start telling you what they want more of by how they respond to you, right? When you're giving a talk or a workshop and the questions they ask, and they're especially when you're working with a group of people and you're coaching them, they are basically telling you what they want more of. So imposter syndrome was one of those things that people kept prefacing to me in sales. What they were experiencing as I was doing a lot of sales coaching and sales speaking was they were telling me how they had never thought about themselves as the seller. They were focused on trying to sell instead of becoming a seller. So the difference is when it's a skill, it's something you do. When it's who you become, you can't not do it. Right. And so the difference is that when you're trying to do something, you're always going to be thwarted or stopped or delayed or deterred by this feeling of imposter. Your feelings get in the way when you're doing a skill, but when you become it, you no longer conceive that you can't not do it. Your mind begins to be creative, innovative. It starts to, create workarounds. You're more likely to go ask for help, ask questions. You're not daunted by your circumstances. You are pressing forward because it's just who you are, right? So that's something I do. And how people get there is that I require that when I work with your team or a group of people, that they create vision. So when people hire me, I said, I'm not going to just create great sellers. What I'm going to create is incredible human beings who will then be your great sellers.
That's amazing. Define vision when you say that, like, because I think, at a cultural level, right? This is, yes, it's about imposter syndrome and improving courage and confidence. But when you bring in that word vision and you're bringing it up to the higher execs who are bringing you in, what's a good vision look like? What's an example of a bad vision or a good vision?
Well, so, so that's interesting because everybody's vision is theirs. So
Right.
I would say a vision that has legs is going to be something that feels impossible, but exhilarating at the same time. So it's
Ooh.
something that when you think about it or when you read it, after you've written it, you are like literally tingling all over. And after the tingling settles, you hit a fear wall, yet you still feel like you still get excited thinking about the possibility of it. If it just terrifies you, period, if all it does is create fear, it's not good. It's not a good one. You want to have that it's a sweet spot that will help you stay out and step out. Will step out and stay out of your comfort zone. It challenges you. It's compelling. You can't stop thinking about it. And so what requires after that is once you create that, now you need accountability, because without the accountability, it will turn into fear, and you will start to form excuses, reasons why you can't. And that's where who you surround yourself becomes important. Because once you create that and you share it with the wrong people, they're going to crabs in a bucket you. If you ever heard that philosopher, why you want to do that? Oh, that's hard. I don't even know any. Like,
Oh yeah.
Aaron, right? Scott is like leaning in. He's all.
Oh yeah.
And when you have when Jim Rohn, when you have the strong people around you, they're going to be like, oh man, I know somebody who did that. Oh, have you read this book? Oh, you know what you should check out. They get excited because you have reminded them of possibility. Right? They're like jumping in, all in. And good people understand you having a big dream doesn't take away from mine. Together, we're better when we're both dreaming big.
This is amazing. I think we can ask like 2 more questions, and Meshell, you will just take over, which I love, because everything you're saying is golden. Like I'm like taking all these notes and I'm like, oh, that's great. That's great. That's a good one. That's a good one.
I want to go back to something that you said when you were introducing yourself. You talked about the perception of chaos. So I'm curious, does that mean that you believe chaos is an illusion?
Yep, absolutely.
Tell me more about that. I think that's a really interesting point that actually could be really helpful for some people.
Well, it's when you go listen, so one of my favorite people was Tony Robbins. And recently I went through a rough passage in life where I almost gave up. I was headed to job, which we know is just over broke. I was like, okay, you know what? Let's dust off this resume and start looking. And then I said, okay, at the same time I'm looking, I'm also filling myself with the possibility. Right? I'm listening to things that help me to remind me, if this is like, I'm going to go down this path, and God created universe, divine, Buddha, Allah, the source. This is what I say all the time. I don't care what you call it, but you got to know there's something greater than us out there. If this is the path that you would have me on, open the door. And of course, I end up listening to something that reminds me that it is about not my circumstances. Circumstances are external. Confidence is internal. Right? Circumstances are temporary. Right? Your confidence is infinite, unlimited. So when you believe in something greater than you, when you believe you have a purpose, a vision, something that I always tell people, stop focusing on the outcome and focus on who you become. Because once you become it, you can't not have it.
Well, I think a lot of people, particularly salespeople, don't want to become a salesperson. They never wanted to become a salesperson. And I think that they recoil from the concept of embracing, this is actually who I am. Mm-hmm. Because for whatever reason, who knows how people grew up or whatever, like there's still a negative connotation and perception around salespeople as a profession. And so I can remember rewinding the tape 20 years, not saying it as articulately as you, but telling people like, Richard, you're a salesperson. You need to get comfortable with doing this stuff. Like if you want to be good, you need to get comfortable with this is who you're going to become.
Yes.
Right. I think that's really hard for people still to accept. They don't want that.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So when you think about sales and chaos, sales is never the same every day. It's going to be different every day. So that's in a human being who our nature, we desire comfort. Like when I give my talks and when I'm starting people off, I say, let me help you understand your reptilian brain. Your reptilian brain that drives your humanness wants to be comfortable, cozy, and warm. So I want you to imagine your brain, your natural self on its own wants to go home after work, get in a Barca lounger, recline, eat some chips, soda,
do nothing.
Watch Netflix till it passes out, crawl into bed, get up and do it all over again the next day. Do you understand that's your nature as a human being? And that is the antithesis, the opposite of any success in sales. You cannot be that person and have a successful sales career. Ain't gonna happen.
Yeah.
So if you want to be successful in sales, you must fight your nature and recreate and rebuild yourself. And unfortunately, there is no company on the planet that pays for that. They pay for your sales training. They don't pay for your self-development. That is on you. So that's why there's so few top sellers, because top sellers invest in themselves. And I always ask my audience, what's the last investment in self you made? Meaning the last podcast you read. What was the last book you read? When was the last conference you paid for to go to yourself? Be it online, half day, 1 hour. What's the last webinar you signed up with to help you with your sales skills? See, if you're not investing in you, why do you think you're going to magically be amazing? Amazing people invest in themselves. And people who have amazing, incredible results in lives invest in themselves. What are you doing?
Hold on one second. Note to self. I'm not as important as I think I am. Okay. Just, I love this. I love it. Like, I want to dial back, like your enthusiasm. I'm sure people are listening. It's like jumping through. It's like, if you're in the car, it's like, it feels like you're sitting right next to me. Where'd that come from? Like, what, were you just always that kid who was just like, you know, Miss Positivity? What was it?
Honestly, like, so I, you know, when we started this, I said my mom. So I've relocated and I'm 10 minutes away from my parents. Y'all, you know, you might want to check that out before you make that decision. I love
I'm thinking you probably made a lot of good decisions,
Scott,
Meshell. I don't know about that one though.
Scott, what is my rule? What is my family rule?
Is that at least 1 or 2 states or something like that?
I have a 2-state buffer rule between me and my parents.
Yeah.
Well, yes. Yeah, 10 minutes is something, y'all, because you get called on a lot at this time of life, right? So, but my mom calls me the wild white child. I was the kid that, because we were raised that Southern Baptist way, I was told I was being grown. I was curious. I was verbal. I was always trying to figure out how or why something worked. And I always, I was considered Pollyanna. How I decided to become the chief confidence igniter and build my business was based off of my first coach, who asked me, what you said, everybody's a master at something. What is your most common question? What do people come to you for all the time? And at that point in time, I was known as, you can tell Meshell anything and she could turn it into a positive.
That's amazing.
Right. And that was just from my background of being raised in a certain way. I was raised in an urban area. I'm formerly incarcerated. Right. I've had some really, fiance, the only guy I ever loved, died, got sick, diagnosed 2.5 months later, he was dead, right? So I've had some things that have brought me to a screeching halt in life. And what brought me back was to remember that you just got to create a vision of something greater and go for it. And the only way to go for it in the midst of your circumstances is you must emit positive. You cannot be a negative person and have a positive, favorable, amazing, magnificent, incredible life. They don't go together. They do not equate. I tell people always ask me, why is my life suck? And they start telling me what they do. I was like, the math ain't mathing, right? It's basic math, right? You getting up every morning complaining about work, screaming at, like, whining on the way to work, talking crap about your coworkers, like all of that, and you want amazing. The math ain't mathing.
That's so good. Why Your Life Sucks. I think that might be the title. How to Fix It is the title of this episode.
Why Your Life Sucks. We'll go with that one.
We are negative by nature.
We are. We like to hold. Let me see what you think about this. Actually, there's a difference between, to me at least, there's a difference between somebody who vocalizes frustrations and somebody who's actually negative.
Yes.
And to me, I don't take somebody as being negative who like complains about this thing, complains about that thing, but I can tell it's just like they're venting. It's not really seeping into the fiber of their core of their being, right? But a lot of people don't perceive folks in that same way. And so they perceive somebody who complains about this or wants this to be better as negative, when really, I think that's just how they deal with it. It's like they kind of talk about something to make it less painful or less scary or something like that. You're nodding your head a little bit. I'm assuming you agree with me in some sense?
Oh, no, I absolutely agree with you. And that's just a conversation. The assumption is when people assume that someone's that way, they've made a judgment, right? And I always tell, replace your judgment with curiosity, right? So if someone is exuding or venting, I just ask a question, right? And after about 2 or 3 questions, you'll know if they're a negative person or if it's just a circumstance or situation that they're working through. Yeah. Right? We all hit, the wall, and it takes everybody a different amount of time to climb that wall. Some people can do it in minutes. Some people, it takes a month, right?
And I've met a lot of positive people that when they do run into a challenge or a setback, it really fucks them up.
Yeah.
Like they're so used to being positive all the time that they can't handle things going wrong or being tough. And it really like derails them for a long time. And I've been accused more than once of being like pessimistic. And I try to tell people, like, it's a little bit of the Western New Yorker in me, in my roots, I think, where you just kind of, complain about things, but I don't absorb those things. And I've always kind of posited myself as like a short-term pessimist, but a long-term optimist.
Yes.
Like something maybe happens today and I'm like, oh my God, seriously? But I know once I'm done saying that and making those aggravated sounds, I know my brain and my heart and soul goes into, okay, now we got to deal with this. Now we got to fix this. Now we got to get through this. Now we got to make it better. It's not that big of a deal. I go through all of those things. And so I have found at least that a lot of successful people actually kind of have this sort of, not necessarily fear, but like this kind of paranoia almost that something bad can happen all the time, but it's okay. I'm going to figure it out in the end. Versus people who have this overly optimistic, positive thing, nothing bad can ever happen. And when something bad does happen that they couldn't avoid, it really screws them up.
Yes. So that is, I don't know. I won't say unrealistic because everybody's reality is their mentality. And I understand what you're saying. So when I teach, confidence, that positivity is just for them to be able to quickly assess, and how to create a solution. Right.
I like
and
that.
Also the positive, that the confidence I teach is contagious. So I think about when I communicate a circumstance that's daunting or difficult, and I'm talking to another person, they actually find their confidence in the way I talk through it. Yes. Right. So just the way I respond to things, the way I respond to other individuals that are negative, the way I respond to my circumstances, anybody around me is always like, oh my God, right? And that's what I do. Like, I understand that this gift that I have in the way I teach my clients, your confidence is meant to be contagious. Whatever you have, if it's your gift, it's value. And if it's value, if you have a gift that's value, that makes you valuable. So valuable means you are able to transfer that value to another human being. If you're not able to transfer what you claim to be your gift and your value to another human being just in how you demonstrate who you are, then it's not value. It's not. That's amazing. Everything we have, especially as leaders, everything I have, they should walk away better for having spent time with me, period. That's amazing. What I teach people. And that's why I exude this, because remember, I'm a leader. So I'm exuding massive amounts of positivity and confidence because I'm here for the masses.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to go deep with you on something you brought up that was certainly shocking and alarming, because I just don't know this world. And when we first started, I said, we've heard, we got introduced to you by Sherilyn Castleman. So people, if you don't know Sherilyn, please go reach out and follow her and content she puts out, as well as Meshell. You know, Scott and I are two white guys putting together a podcast on sales. And we know sales is a very white guy dominant role, right? And you mentioned something that I don't think I've ever asked anybody about. You mentioned that you were incarcerated.
Yeah.
Then you mentioned your fiance. And I don't care the circumstances of what happened. I don't care who missed their quota. It's July 2nd of 2024. If you miss your quota June 30th, okay, I get it. But listen to what Meshell is saying. She has faced life shit that is just unbelievable. And so my question for you as I put this out there, as a woman of color, where things like incarceration or situations like this might happen more frequently than it does in my world. How do you bounce back when, at least in the way I perceive it, is there's a lot of extra cards stacked against you. There's a whole bunch of stuff, right? So I want to see you as you. How do you go, whatever I don't care what it was. How did you get out and go, I'm not letting that happen again? Like, and again, it could just be in your nature, and it could be that it was a bullshit thing in the first place, but still, you got thrown into a system that is not always fair to people.
Yes. Well, one, it was not bullshit. I did it.
Okay.
I'm kidding. The second thing is, I have learned that excellence. So that's part of my family is. I was taught by people, hardworking people, like I said, from the South. Both my parents actually were raised in the South, in a part of the South where they were raised where they still saw colored only kind of signs, right?
I grew up in Macon, Georgia, so I get it.
Yeah,
I'm the generation behind that.
Boomers, right? So they're boomers, right? And so I was taught to, you know, for who I am, I was taught to be not seen and not heard, which is very interesting because they thought that would be safety for me. Right? If you be quiet, you won't get in trouble. And but having the nature of who I was, that came out in a different way in my high school years in the urban area we were surrounded by. I just got in trouble, right? So
so was it just a wake-up call though? Was it like,
yeah, it was.
Okay,
it was going to happen based on who I was hanging around and what I was doing. It was going to happen, and I'm glad it happened early because it gave me enough runway to change my life. What I discovered was, one, I did not want to go back. Right, I was crystal 100% clear on that. So I assessed my surroundings and I said, who does not get to go back to the people who have jobs? So I took whatever job I get. It was like janitor, frack, like I took all kind of crap. I remember taking just jobs where I would just be like, didn't want to get out of bed, didn't want to do it. And I also knew the other option was, if you don't do this, you know where you're going. And so once I figured that out, I also figured out, okay, now you got the job. How do you keep the job? Because that's the other, you got to keep the job to stay out. And I noticed, I started observing at work, who keeps jobs? Whoever the manager likes. Well, I didn't care about being liked because that felt like too hard. So I decided to just be really good, like valuable.
There's only two types. One, whoever the manager likes, and the other one is whoever does really good.
Right. So how can I be valuable? So then how do you be valuable to somebody? You need to know what their quota, what their deliverables are, and always be there to help them. And as a seller, that's how every manager I've had, you can call them. They will still to this day. I had a manager for 15 years ago, hear me on a podcast, call my number because I've had the same cell phone number for 16 years because he was like, oh my God, you're the same energetic person. You're just more refined and defined, right? You mastered who you are. But it was that, how do you do well? You know what they need. And I'm not sucking up to you. Like at the end of the quarter, when I hit my quota, I call my manager. I'm like, hey, have you hit your quota? No. Can I pull in some extra stuff early in the quarter to help you meet it? Is there anyone you want me to reach out to that needs a motivation or a boost? Right? That's just, so it's been my nature for years. So excellence. I tell people, if you think of the term abundance, which is an overflow, right? Everybody wants an abundant sales career. If you didn't, you wouldn't be in sales. Excellence and abundance, excellence will always find abundance. mediocrity finds nothing.
Yeah.
You want to be
more mediocrity.
successful, show up and be excellent. Stop worrying about what you get, what you deserve, what somebody did or didn't say. Just be excellent. Just do your best, and it will always find opportunity, abundance, promotions, leads, referrals, recommendations.
This is what everybody's asking about all the time when they're in jobs. How do I navigate the corporate ladder? Like, what's your number one tip, Meshell, to go from rep to manager or from manager to VP? And I'm always just like, well, you could start with just being fucking good at your job that you're in right now. That's probably a great place to start. But said better, work on excellence, because that excellence will create the abundance.
Yeah, I love it. So we lost
your mic for a second, Meshell.
Yeah, there it is.
There you are.
So
people have all these magical formulas. I'm like, just be excellent.
Yeah, right? There's one formula.
You said you were
job,
and you're making excuses. That was the thing that I learned early on. Like, and I'll give this story. I was in sales, and my manager, Larry Costello, if you're listening to this, I never forget this guy. He was my blessing, game changer for me. I had an argument. I was a pharmaceutical rep. We were in the diner. We were arguing so loud, they asked us to leave. I remember going home, and at the time, my mom, she was my go-to for stuff like this. And I called her and I was complaining. I was like, he's horrible. And she said, oh, I'm sorry. When you signed up for that job, I think I know my child well. Did you tell him you were going to be better than sliced bread? You can tell him you were going to be the best rep they ever had. I said, yeah. She said, did you tell him you would only do that if you liked your manager? Did you tell him you would do that if all the circumstances were exactly the way you wanted? Or you just told him you would be that?
Good job, Mom.
My whole body like stopped. And I was like, and she was like, okay, call me back next week. Click. That's how she used to do me. Yeah, right. I didn't have a huggy mom. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Work, and I apologized to Larry. And then it said, sorry, this is not what I committed to be and who I committed to. By the time I left that company, when I went to say bye to Larry, we both like, I had become a favorite and he had become my best. Like, I learned so much that it doesn't matter how you start. Only matters is what your intent is. If you want to turn things around, you must be responsible and accountable to own up for the mess you created. That's the only way you can clear it. You can't create something until you clear the mess.
That's amazing. Speaking of Mom, I know we've got to be conscious of your time. So we got about 5 minutes left, right? Because you look, you walk the walk and talk the talk. You're getting off this thing because you need to go talk to your mom. Like your mom called, so you're going to be that person. So we always sort of end first of all, thank you for getting super deep and personal. Thank you for inspiring us. I know Scott told me he had about 3 hours of sleep last night. I think you woke him up for sure.
No.
So but we always end this with asking someone, what questions do you have for us? So for the next minute or two, if there's something you'd like to ask us, feel free.
Yeah, so I love that you guys have jumped in, and Scott was saying that, his experience of people struggling to be incredible sellers. Like, and I have an example right now. I just gave a keynote for an organization. I have the opportunity to go and work with them again. Well, they were honest. They were like, we don't have the budget. We can kind of fix our stuff. So I'm like, okay, how do I get a sponsor? Like, that's something I've never done before. So I can go speak in Stuttgart, Germany at the Women's Automotive Summit, right? And so, like your eyes got big, Richard. Yeah, great opportunity. So I'm like, hey, Scott, if I have a question, somebody else listening here might want to know something like that.
So the question specifically is, how do I get sponsors?
Yeah. Well, what would you tell somebody who was looking to do something they'd never done before? Yeah.
What would I tell somebody who's looking to do something they've never done? First of all, I'd say find people who have done that thing and make them your new best friend, whatever that means. Engage with that person, reach out, see if you can be helpful to them, try to shadow them, digest whatever they've put out, books, podcasts, webinars, whatever. I want to try to learn from people who've done this specific thing before. I probably would say be careful not to try to digest everything on this particular topic, because you're going to end up confusing yourself. So I don't need 100 different people's opinion on this thing. I would love, 2 or 3. And then from those 2 or 3, I could figure out which things they do maybe vibe with me a little better, and I try to take, you know, that path, and then I'd apply it consistently at scale, not expecting any kind of like miraculous result with it, and just tinker and tweak until I get some results that I'm looking for. But that's how I would do it. That's how I think about it. If I'm trying to do something and I don't know how to do it, I got to attach myself to somebody who has and learn directly.
Thank you. And Richard, did you want to jump in and add?
Everything Scott said. And if I don't know someone who's done it, but I know someone like you, or I know someone like Scott, or I know Sherilyn, I will tap my network and say, hey, I'm trying to figure this out. Do you know someone who's done this before?
Yeah.
Because a lot of time, another piece of this is that if I call you, it's kind of like, look, I told you, I talked to Sherilyn and said, who are some women I should talk to support on the podcast? She sent me this list, right? So now I'm connected to you. Now, if I need something around motivation or inspiration, or I've got a client who's like, hey, do you do this? I'm like, no, but Meshell does. Or if someone asks me for something, I'll find a way. So, you know, we've done sponsorship stuff. We can tell you our sort of experience with it. We've never done sponsorship. Well, I've never done sponsorship to go speak somewhere. I've never done that. That's an interesting one.
It's an interesting one, right?
Yeah. But I think, you know, I'll answer my idea is that if you've got a newsletter, if you've got, you know, LinkedIn posts or a blog, sell the sponsorship to that, and then let them know part of what they're paying for is for you to go and empower other women in another country. That it's not just, hey, you're paying me to advertise. Actually, I'm going to take what you're doing, and I'm going to go create some more good in the world, right? And that may be, if positioned the right way, that might be an extra way to get that sponsor on board.
Nice. And the reason I asked the question is because it's a question that I'm going to be reaching out to. And I want people to say, when it comes to confidence, nobody knows everything. The willingness to be uncomfortable, right? To that inconvenience, that uncertainty. We tell ourselves story. That's the whole thing in sales, especially. It feels like, it looks like people were successful know-it-all. They're just a master. I was telling someone, excuse my language, I just wrote this down the other day. It was like, fuck the answer, master the ask. We get so stuck in whether they're going to say yes or no, instead of mastering asking properly, or asking better, or asking more people. It is all in the ask, because you rarely get your answers or what you need immediately. It requires multiple, just like in sales. It's a numbers game. The more people you reach out to, the more likely someone's going to buy your product. The more likely someone's going to refer you or recommend you for something. And we're so stuck in, you know, the answer versus the ask.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Well, Meshell, Meshell, how can people get a hold of you? Like, if people are listening and you're like, I wonder if our company should hire someone like her. The answer is fucking yes, right? Fuck the answer, master the ask.
Exactly.
Right? So how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, they can. Meshell, Meshell Baker, Baker.com, or just go to LinkedIn, send me a DM, and let's make it happen. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Beautiful.
Awesome. Meshell, this has been fantastic. So nice to meet you, and appreciate all the wisdom and everything you shared. It's been great.
Yeah, you guys have been delightful. Scott, so glad you're
I'm doing the best I can.
It's mastering time zones right now, and easy for me. I appreciate you, sir.
That's a lot of fun. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time on the Surf and Sales Podcast.